Hello everybody and welcome back to Operation Logistics, where we are implementing some of this here. And I did just notice that we have a nice border here of 10 pixels, but we don't over here. And I'd like to change that. I think the reason that happened is because we aren't in the upper center. Yeah, that's definitely why. I mean, maybe it's okay that as we disable these, it centers a bit more. I think that's actually fine. So we're going to go ahead and delete these buttons here for right now. They will be back soon. And then we are going to go ahead and remove this text and put in a Text Mesh Pro text for right now. And we're just going to have this be exactly the same size as the button, have it be black, and have this be a font size of 16 for right now. And ultimately, we probably want this to be an icon. Like a colored icon that you can click on. But for right now, we're just going to simply have it say DV, and then whether it is assigned or unassigned to a root. For right now, that'll have to do. Let's go ahead and duplicate this a bunch more times. There we go. Get ourselves up to 12. And then disable this, because there's only going to be one to start with. I mean, realistically, we should probably have them all be disabled. But for right now, I do want to have this one enabled. So the next thing we're going to need to do is make it so that the interaction panel, actually, or not the interaction panel, the hex selection window actually pops up. We do want to make sure that the tooltip is behind it, or in front of it, and actually probably the toolbar as well. So I think we go ahead and put the hex selection window up here. What is it doing? It's not wanting to go in between these. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so I think we should go into our UI and create a script for it. Create C# script, and this will be hex selection window. Now then, the hex selection window will need to know about the hex manager for sure. So, private hex manager, we'll just assign it in the inspector. Public hex manager, hex manager. Now I don't think we need a start function here. We are going to need an essentially onActivate function. Is there a built-in one in Unity? OnActivate. Is onAwake called when you activate it? Let me look this up. Unity onActivate. It's called onEnable. Okay. So void onEnable. Okay, so this is where we would populate the information. So biome hex equals hex manager dot selected hex. Is that not in the hex manager? Where is that? I think that might be... Well, we can... Hang on, this isn't a biome hex, this is a building hex. What am I talking about? Building hex equals... There we go. So let's go into our building hex here and check when we click on it in no interaction mode, it's in business. Okay. That's fine. I can handle that. So let's go into the hex selection window, and rather than hex manager, we are going to say public business, like so. Building hex equals, this will be business.selected hex. Selected hex. There we go. Wait, what? Oh, it's int3. Business dot hex manager or business dot manager. We don't have access to that? I'm certain that business has a reference to the manager. Is it a private? Does business not have a reference to the manager? It still doesn't? Okay. I mean, we've got our int3 selected hex. We could then, I suppose, do public hex manager as well. And then building hex equals manager, manager dot selected subhex. No, we need selected world hex. Right? Hang on, no, that gets us our world hex. Yeah, that's right. Dot biome hexes. And this would be business dot selected hex dot biome hex dot. This won't give us a building hex though. We don't necessarily need a building hex. Okay, we don't actually need this. That's irrelevant. So let's go ahead and come on into here. And we're going to figure out what all we need. So let's go ahead and... Actually, now that I think about it, we can delete all of these. That should be fine. And all we need is... Well, we need a reference to using unityengine.ui. And then we need a public... Or rather, a public what am I thinking? TM Pro. There we go. That's what I'm thinking. TextMesh Pro UGUI. And this needs to be simply called hex name field. We're also going to have one for the info panel field, like so. And public TM, no, not TM Pro, public button. Okay, that's all the information we need here, I think. Let's go ahead and make the hex manager appear and disappear for right now. And then we'll make it populate. So the hex selection window can go right there. We will toss that a reference to the business and to the hex manager and the hex name and the info panel field and the button. Okay. So, from here, we need to figure out how we want to populate this, but first, I want to go into the business and give the business a reference to that window. Public hex selection window, hex selection window. There we go. And then I think we need to do a public void on hex selection. And then this will simply be, for right now, well, we can pass in int3 hex to select. And then say selected hex. Why is it not liking that? Why is it not liking this at all? Oh. Because I put a semicolon in there. I am an idiot. Okay. So selected hex equals hex to select. easy enough. And then we will just simply say hex selection window dot game object. This needs to be lowercase. Hex selection window dot game object dot set active true. Okay. So in the building hex, we should then, instead of setting this directly, business.selected hex equals hex ID, instead we should say business.onSelect hex, and we'll pass in the hex ID. Did I call it on hex selection? Yes, I did. On hex selection. Okay, so now when we select a building hex, this should pop open. It won't populate yet, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and come in here and make sure that that actually pops up. Actually, it won't because I forgot to set it up in the business. Okay, come on. You can be done. There we go. Okay. I forgot to set it up here. We're going to need to pass the hex selection. Come on. We're going to need to pass the hex selection window in here. Otherwise, it won't work. Now we'll try this again. Okay. Come on. One of these days it'll work. There we go. Okay, so we'll come on down here. Now we don't own this hex, but we can still select it. And this does indeed pop open. As you can see, there is no box collider here, so we should make one. And there's no way to close it yet either. So we'll make a box collider. This will be centered, and it will be a size in the X direction of 300 and the Y direction of 350. There we go. Oh, that's not where we want it to be. So I guess we will need to add in 150 and 175. Oh, that's not quite right. I wrote 170 instead of 175. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now we need to populate this window with the actual hex. So the business knows what hex has been selected. So we can go ahead and in our date tooltips, we can pretty much copy this and paste that in here in the on enable. And of course, we do need to change it a little bit. Owned does not appear. So we need to fix that. Kind of like this. I'm just going to copy all of this in. We're going to get rid of the hex ID. So instead of hex ID, we're going to be using business.selectedHex, like so. And then this will need to be hex name field equals all of this. And once again, instead of hex index, we're going to be using business.selectedHex dot building hex. So that is going to be a little more complicated to get to. Building hex dot toString plus owned. What? Oh, because I need to do dot text equals that. Okay, so now it should populate the name field, and let's just make sure that that works before we move on. Come on, let's go. And then we're going to need to put in a few variables, at least for the post office. I'm not sure where exactly we'll store those. I don't really want to put it in the balance variables because, I mean, it is a balance variable, but that's getting really long. Okay, so let's hop down over here. Okay, it is in fact filling it, but it's a little too big, or a little too long even. So let's go ahead and see if we can do something about that. Bring this down to size 16 maybe? Yeah, size 16 works. Sounds good. So we'll go ahead and have that be size 16 by default. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we want to consider is where do we want to have all of our variables for each type of building? The balance variables here are getting a little long as it is. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a holder class for this in the core, and I'm going to call this something along the lines of building balance, like so. And then this can be a mono behavior, I think. That's fine. Let's go ahead and save that for right now. And then in the business, I'm going to go ahead and put in right up here at the top near balance variables, public building balance, and I think I'm going to have that not be a mono behavior. This is just a data class, but we do want to serialize the field because I want it to show up in the inspector. So then we can do something along the lines of header postal office. And then this would have the 4 variables that we put in up here. Let me re-enable this so that I can actually see. As soon as it compiles, there we go. So we've got ourselves our public float sorting capacity equals 1.0f. And then I'm just going to create a note up here, or rather a comment. All of these numbers are either absolute or per hour. Okay, so public float sorting capacity equals 1f. Public float loading capacity equals 5f. And this is meter cubed. And then public float... Actually, this one can be an int. Public int vehicle capacity equals 1. And we should probably have a public vehicle type. And it bears noting that we're going to have these for each of these, so I'm going to have to name them something slightly different, or have this be subclassed, one or the other. But that's something we can tackle soon enough. So let's go ahead and create a public enum vehicle type, and we're going to say delivery vehicle, which is a base delivery vehicle type. And then we're going to need truck, train, ship, and plane. Okay. So our base vehicle type is going to be equal to vehicle type dot delivery vehicle. And then we also have our transport capacity. So this will be public float transport capacity. And this will actually be something along the lines of this. For now, we're just going to return 10F in meters cubed. But here in just a little bit, I'm going to implement some stats for these vehicle types as well. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and put a cut in here, and that'll be something for next episode. See you all then.